Hayley, thanks very much for joining me. So we're going to talk about your paper on studying the US rebalance. Obviously a pertinent topic these days. To start with, what do you think the aim of the rebalance is, and do you think it can work?
Sure. Well, the aim of the rebalance is really to reinforce US leadership in the region. And in order to do that, the US has to achieve another couple of goals. One of them is reassuring US allies in the region. Another one is getting US allies to do more for their own defence and to spend more on their defence. And also signing the TPP as an economic aspect of the rebalance. So they're the main goals.
Okay. So how do you think the rebalance is going in achieving those aims? Do you think America's on track?
In some areas, yes, the US is on track. I think militarily it has been able to reassure a couple of allies, Japan for instance, by telling Japan that the islands that are in dispute with China, the Senkaku Diaoyu Islands, are covered under the treaty. But in other areas, for instance, the messaging has been really bad, and that's partly because some of Obama's senior staff have been shuffled over the course of his two administrations. So that really has put the messaging on the back foot.
So in that context, you talk quite a bit in the paper about how some of America's partners in the region, in particular Australia, Japan and South Korea, could deepen their support for Washington. What might that look like for Australia in particular?
Well, there's a couple of requests that the US has of Australia. Specifically, American analysts would really like Australia to be a voice for the region and to come out of its shadow and really lead the region on a couple of key issues. And one of them that came up quite often in Washington was on the South China Sea. And the US does have a lot of other requests of Australia in the military area in terms of increasing its interoperability with the US and engaging in more defence activities with the US and with US allies. So there really were sort of a range of issues the US would like Australia to make good on.
So what about America's expectations of its other allies in the region? What do we think that it's after from partners like South Korea and Japan that they're not doing already?
Well, with Japan, the key message I heard was an economic one, that really Japan could help the rebalance through signing the Trans-Pacific Partnership. Now that's a bit difficult for Japan because Shinzo Abe campaigned on the promise to protect the automotive sector and farmers. So whether or not that will actually happen is up for debate. With regards to South Korea, expectations were much lower than for Japan and for Australia. Americans really just want South Korea to keep North Korea's provocations in check and also to get along much better with Japan.
So if the Allies manage to provide more of what America's after and that works to stabilise the rebalance, cementing American primacy in the region, how do we think that Beijing is likely to respond?
Well, if the rebalance is very successful, and I think we're looking a long way down the track because the rebalance is a long-term policy, it's not a short-term fix. If it's successful, I think what we'll see from China is a softening in terms of its territorial claims. I don't think China would be as assertive because it would see a much stronger US alliance network across the region.
To finish up, what do you think what's your policy recommendation to the Australian government in light of this report that you've written?
I would strongly encourage our government to consider the US requests of Australia in both the diplomatic and military areas, because if Australia wants a strong US that is engaged in the region, it really needs to support the rebalance more so than it has done already. But at the same time, our government really does need to explain the reasons for why it's doing this to the wider community to really dispel any kind of concerns.
Great. Well, look, thank you very much for joining me, Hayley. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Harry.